finds her and is about to slay her with a sword, and is overcome by the sight of her, by her beauty, and takes her home to Troy once more. Is it the Temple of Elpida?
It's an altar, right? Anyway.
Yeah. That's the main tradition about her being taken home from Troy to Sparta. On the other hand, there's a long-standing tradition of her never having gone to Troy at all. That's reflected in, most famously, maybe in the Stesiphorus fragment, when he apologizes for Helen, saying that she never went to Troy and spent the entire war in Egypt.
Was there an age difference, a big age difference between Helen and
I think that the general thinking on that is yes. We would expect in that period girls to be married off fairly young, 14 or 15 years old, to establish, and especially if there's a dynastic match to be made. Menelaus would be that one. So I would expect Menelaus to be at least twice her age. And but Paris would probably be, I think, is generally thought of as younger.
Ένα ερώτημα, ωραία.
I was wondering, is there any evidence in Egyptian texts that alludes to Helen's sojourn in Egypt?
I think our best evidence, actually, I don't know about the Egyptian evidence. There may be. There's plenty of evidence in the Odyssey and other texts themselves. The interesting connection to the drugs here, for instance, that she uses to drug them in Sparta, are claimed in the Odyssey to have come from Egypt and to have been given to her by who it was there as she was being trained. There's some evidence to believe that Homer is alluding to her as sort of a magical being, as a witch. She's almost, since she's using drugs, in the same category as Circe or Calypso.
Don't be the Helen did this whole scheme. Obviously, was a smart woman.
Yeah.
She created all these problems to see if Menelaus will come after her.
I suppose that's possible, and I could conceive of various ancient playwrights, for instance, playing on such a thing. Not that any did that in particular. But as I said in the paper, I think that the most intriguing thing about Helen is that nobody ever answers the question about whether she went willingly or was abducted. It's always kept up in the air. Yeah. What's that? What?
She is not.
What's that?
She was the only one to know that.
Yes, exactly. That's right. And all the people that wrote about her keep her secret for her.
Isn't there, throughout the text, it says that it's the goddess who did this, that led her on? I mean, that's the only justification.
Well, that's what she claims, especially in the Iliad, that she is completely under the control of Aphrodite, but he thinks the lady doth protest too much.
I would think that he would have killed her had there not. I mean, I can't imagine a Greek saying, yeah, this is my wife, she cheated on me, now I'm going to take her so that it happens there. Unless there's a religious justification.
Well, the justification in the tradition is that he's overcome by her beauty.
Well,
Yeah.
But she bears her breast, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But
No,
she repeatedly says, he says the same thing. The goddess led her astray.
Right. It's always difficult when you're talking about the effects of gods on mortals to understand how much we're to take that as the actual immortals interfering in the affairs of mankind, or the effect of Aphrodite against lust, overcoming her in her lust for Paris. I think that that is also left purposely ambiguous in many cases. There are other examples with other emotions. For instance, in the first book of the Iliad, when Aeneas is about ready to attack Agamemnon, Athena steps in and physically restrains him from doing so. Keeps his sword in his sheath so he can't draw up and attack him. But it could easily be interpreted, that passage, as the good sense and wisdom of Athena coming into the mind of Achilles and preventing him from doing so.
I think it's kind of like when you might say, the devil made me do it.
Yes, exactly.
There may be some kind of truth to that, but it doesn't quite let you off the hook, you know.
Yeah, that's
all the
right.
way.
Homer, I think, and the tradition in general, likes to keep those things ambiguous. I think they've really decided, wants to keep it mysterious, mythical, if you will. Yes, that's it. Oh, no, I thought I saw it.
I think that she lived in Laconia with Minerva. And traditionally, they were both buried in a place called Therapy.
Yes.
The problem is to identify which is the authentic Therapy, mentioned first by the Laconian poet Alpman.
Yes.
At the end of the 7th century,
Mm-hmm.
in the BC. I think that
Unless I did go to a listening.
Professor Hartley has come very close to the solution of this problem. Everything
Yeah.
matters that if we identify like a demon with Alpman's therapy,
Mm-hmm.
then we might take like a demon as a city and not as a place.
Yes.
Because in this fragment, like a demon is named well-powered,
Yes.
well-powered therapy,
Yeah.
where there was a venerable temple. That's what Alpman says. Pastoria says various different things. He visited the place, he referred to what Professor Dillon has mentioned before, that the place was named after the daughter of Alex.
Yes.
She was named Therapy, and Therapy gave the name to the place.
Yes.
But I think that Alpman refers to another place, quite different from what Pausanias may have thought, because when Alpman refers to the well-powered Therapy, he refers to a settlement rather than to an individual place.
Yes.
If therapy is to be identified with like a demon, and I think it is,
Okay.
then the venerable temple is what we're going to see tomorrow,
Yes.
the temple in the middle of the palace, and then the position that the couple was buried in therapy
Yes.
takes validity, takes corroboration
Mm-hmm.
from the magnificent Thoros tomb
Yes.
here in Europe, which has been uncovered in Pellana, in Pellana.
Yes.
So this might be the grave of the couple,
Yes.
which according to Homer returned home in Laconia.
Yes.
To Euripides, she returned in Sparta. And she was shy and ashamed of all the women which who cares there
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. But according to Laconia, the place where she returned was not Sparta, but Laconia.
Yes.
If Laconia is what was followed later by Pellana,
Mm-hmm.
and the palace is there, the venerable temple is in the same place,
Yes.
and the tomb of Helen and Minerva is presumably the one we have found in Laconia.
Well,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I just add one more bit of confusion to this?
Yeah.
There's a note in Stephanos Byzantinos that some people call Therapni Sparti.
Yeah.
So there we have, it could be like a demon, it could be Sparti, and Therapni, we assume is the Menelem, we assumed. But in fact, these names are very complicated, and they
Yeah.
seem to be interchangeable at some points, and at
Yes.
other points they seem to be different.
Certainly they are, but the problem is who is the authentic therapy, which is the latest one. Because I think what happened here is that Sparta carried the cults and the names of the original city of Laconia to its environment. And the cult of Menelaus, and of course the cult of Agamemnon, who died in Mycenae, according to the Homeric epic, but later he was worshipped in the vicinity of Sparta. So Sparta wanted everything to be in Sparta. Even the heroes of Messenia, Idas and Lyges, the twin princes, they also allegedly have been buried in Sparta, And Pausanias, who accepts everything, especially about Sparta, and who thought that the house of Neros is being given to somebody, the individual living, when he came to this, he protested and said, right, it is impossible. I cannot accept that even those have been buried in Sparta. So Sparta had an interest to bring everything in Sparta. And this, I think, conceals the secret of the disappearance of Laconia. That's my
Great.
Any other question, please? If we don't have any other questions, then I'd like to announce the program we have for tonight and tomorrow in Mpakis. And around 6 o'clock this afternoon, we have a bus from Sparta. But it's very important, as the driver asked me to convey to you, that we have to meet by the square, the town square, because right here the bus is blocking the traffic, and we hear all the kind of complaints. And so we have to walk about 50 meters to arrive to go to the town square, take a bus at 6 o'clock sharp. And then going to Sparta, and we will go to have a dinner tonight in a place Mr. Stellakos already prepared for us. I know.
It's going to be open tonight. It's going to be open.
I think Christos make a nice comment, nice question, I can say. My friend Christos asked me, will it be like last night? When it was closed. But we understand what happened last night, because it was a very special night for the Greeks, not only Sparta, all over the world. And last night, the owner of the restaurant could not find people to work for him, because everybody left. Everybody called in, sick or whatever.
Celebrate.
So it's understandable. But tonight we will go all together to have a dinner. I think it's a parody.
9 o'clock, Mr. Stellakos asked us to be ready at 9 o'clock. We have a bunch of cars, and we will drive to his, actually it's related, another Stellakos. Up and down. We were cheerful, we were disappointed, but we were convinced that we should find something important in this place, which has been quite overlooked by all archaeologists. Nobody has ever dug in this place before, nobody has suspected its importance. And it is curious, nothing of course was there to show the importance of the site, except a small medieval fortress on the top of the hill, which gave its name to the self, which is named Paleokos, which comes from the medieval era. Precisely, I think it is the Frankish period of the beginning of the 15th century AD. Cartledge in his book about Sparta and Laconia has noticed this fortress, and he suspected that behind or below it there was a small remain of a Hellenistic fortification. I think it is wrong, and it urged many confusions about the antiquity of the site, which prevail until today. And in the last session of the Federal Archaeological Council in Athens, some archaeologists, renowned archaeologists, said that Pellana was an important center in the Hellenistic period, and some of them dated the wall to the Hellenistic period. The appearance of the wall does not persuade us that it belongs to the Mycenaean period, because it was used and reused again in classical historical antiquity, and it was destroyed. I think we have a historical reference to the destruction of the Cyclopean wall of Lacedaemon in Theodore Spiropoulos, when he writes that in 369 the Arcadian general Lycomedes, following the invasion of Epaminondas in the Peloponnese, made a raid in this area, which was garrisoned by 300 Lacedaemonians, as he named them, Lacedaemonians, not Spartiatus. So Lycomedes ravaged the area and pulled down the wall and has killed all the garrison of the 300 Lacedaemonians. Some of them have been allowed to be buried in this holy place. And some 30 years ago, or more, funeral stealing was found in the area, and it was included in the Inscriptiones Graecae. It was dedicated to some Olviadas who fell in battle. You know this from like expression when we have to do with Spartan, Laconian funeral stealer. They are named only if the deceased has fallen in battle. And the formula is this one and polemo, in battle. So Olviadas and polemo. Some scholars have associated the funeral stealing with this area, but they didn't know exactly if it came from a cemetery or from any other place. During our excavation, beyond the left, we found another stele, which was dedicated to another of these soldiers who fell in this battle. His name was Enisikos, and we had also this formula, en polemo. It is dated at the beginning of the 4th century, so it must be associated with this raid undertaken by Lycomedes against Laconia. Pellana was always garrisoned, especially during these critical events, which preceded the decisive battle at Mantinea, where Epaminondas was killed. And the king Agesilaos was present in this place because it took place in whole Laconia, in whole Laconian territory. If you want to pass from Laconia to Megalopolitis or Messenia with the Peloponnese or the rest of Greece, you have to pass through the northern extremities of Paigetos, and this is a pass which was taken by the Spartans when they conquered Messenia in the first and the second.
Καλημέρα.
I think this is the pass, the road, the way taken by the two princes. If we come, if we want to make literature reality and history. In this literature, I think it's the first text in international journey literature, the 4th book of the Odyssey, when it refers to the famous journey made by Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. First to Pylos, where he met the king Nestor, and then escorted by his son, Pisistratos, to Lacedaemon. Homer is clear, he doesn't mention Sparti, as Professor Dillon explained yesterday, the wedding of the son and the daughter of Menelaus in heaven took place at Lacedaemon, and the bride, Megapenelope, the son, Telemachus, not only couple, came from Sparti. Sparti tent. I think there is only one explanation. If the wedding took place here, it is understandable why the poet or Mensa says that the bride came from another city, from Sparta. When they arrived in Laconia, it began to be dark. Then, at the end of the day, so when it says, "Οι δείξον ήλιν Laconia κοιτώεσαν." They arrived at Laconia, follow, and κοιτώεσαν. I leave this epithet as it stays in the Homeric text because it requires special explanation and investigation, I would say. And then they went to the palace of the famous, the known, glorious Menelaus. It is a matter of terminology, it is a matter of topography, it is a matter of archaeological precision to solve this problem. First, in the grammatical order, when Homer mentions Laconia as the first city of the kingdom of Menelaus, it adds the other cities as well, and he connects them with conjunctions, with ke, te, ive, and we all know that certainly the poet knew very good Greek, and he was aware when he was registering the cities of the kingdom, he does the same thing about the kingdom of Agamemnon and the kingdom of Nestor. He puts first the first city, the capital city, and then the rest of the cities or the areas of the cities which took part in this expedition. The same thing happens about Laconia. First city is Laconia, and then follow the other cities connected, as we said before, with these actions, which always unite similar things. So, what is my theory now? What I bring to you now is a new interpretation of the term Laconia. For me, Laconia is a city and not an area. How was the whole matter confused? I think that it began earlier, but it was strengthened later by Pausanias when he visited Sparta in the 2nd century AD and wrote these famous phrases. When I leave the suburb of Fornax to the north of Sparta, I go to the city itself, which is named Sparta. Sparta was named from the beginning, but later he took also the name of Laconia. And this name, adds Pausanias, was used at the beginning for the land, for the area, for the site. Strabo, 2 centuries before, has said that no, Laconia, Homeric Laconia cannot be a site, it must be a city. And as I mentioned yesterday, there is a fragment from a poem of the Laconian poet Alcman of the 7th century BC, which refers, it's only one phrase, one line, refers to a venerable temple in Therapni, which is nicknamed Well Tower, και σεμνών ναών, and the venerable temple. He mentions and he refers, he's not a historian, he's a poet. Sparta never produced a historian. This is also a very interesting matter. He had, so to say, religious poetry, religious history. Nobody was allowed to write history in the sense that Herodotus and later Thucydides did. therapy. Is this the therapy of Pausanias? Is this a therapy which led archaeologists, first Heinrich Schliemann and then the British School, to the east of Spati, in the hills of Kokinorachi, to postulate Pallas Menelaus in heaven? Because they started excavated in Laconia under this instruction of Pausanias. Menelaus and Helen had a temple in Therapy, and they have been buried in the same place. So, archaeologists went there, and it is quite reasonable. They sought a palace in the area of Spati. Who dare go out away of Spati? Come to Pellana, for example, or to any other place. Even if he followed the catalogue of ships, I mean, this part referring to Laconia and to the kingdom of Menelaus. We did this in 1980. We decided to leave the middle valley of the Rotas and come to this area to see what happens. It was a systematic work. It was a work grown by disappointments and by success. This was an area where nothing could be seen. The wall was demolished and covered by bushes, and the area was cultivated. And this added to the destructions of the monuments, which have already suffered from in this long period, from the prehistoric times down to the Turkish occupation. What is the outcome of this work? I would say not something very impressive, but I think that there are some instructive details to be underlined here, and some buildings which came to life, on which we must discuss and give our interpretation and take it on. Is this wall a cyclopean wall? We must say our view about it. The trial trenches, our excavations in the foundations of the wall have brought to light many qualities of Mycenaean pottery of the early 13th century BC, especially foots and parts of kylikes, which are diagnostic for the date of the erection of the Mycenaean walls, the Cyclopean walls, in the whole Mycenaean world, because these walls date usually a little later than the palaces themselves. I think that the palaces everywhere in Greece, and I have been myself working in various areas of Mycenaean palaces, for example in Thebes or Komenos in the ocean, I saw that the palaces everywhere have been built, the same happens also in Pylos. They have been built at the closing years of the late Helladic 3A period, say the end of the 14th century BC. And then after a generation or so, collapse, small destruction, occurred, which urged the inhabitants to restore the ruins, to redecorate the palaces, and to rebuild many of the auxiliary, of the supplementary buildings which surround the megara. So we have two main phases in the palatial architecture in the Mycenaean period. The one is late Helladic 3A, and the next, the span is not very big, as I said before, it's about 30 years, late Helladic 3B1. So I think that the same thing happened here. The walls, the Cyclopean walls, were made maybe a generation after the erection, the completion of the erection of the palace. Why? Did they feel secure? Did they pretend to be strong? Was there an imminent danger from somewhere? I think that this is indicated by the archive of Linear B tablets found in Pylos, which have been characterized as the Oka tablets or Oka tablets, which refer to some naval raids in the south-western coast of Messenia, and the palace takes care or sends some soldiers there to inspect the area and protect the land from these raids. Are they to be connected with the raids of the sea people which destroyed the Mycenaean state and the Hittite, the state of the Hittites, and who invaded Egypt during the reign of Merneptah and Ramses III? I think yes. My opinion is that this Mycenaean regime, the Mycenaean state, met its end with the raids of these sea people, which in waves came from the west, from Sicily, from South Italy, from Sardinia. The names are written in Medineta book, and Apostoleli has shown us yesterday some of the depictions of the battles, these old battles, which are represented in Medineta book, which show the invasions of these sea people. We have also their names. They are called Sardana, Tursa, they called first of all Sekelesh, which must be the Sicilians. So who were these sea people? Were they Greek? Where did they come from exactly? And how they landed there and came to destroy the Mycenaean state and the state of the Hittites and invade Egypt? My opinion is that these people are Greek. And I think that they might be identified with the Heracles. And I think that these are the returning Heracles, which, according to Thucydides, are different from the enslaved Dorians, which I think, and I propose, to be identified with the Melians, the first inhabitants of this city and founder of Laconia.
Well, the Dorians are the minions?
Pardon?
The Dorians are the minions?
I think yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Armenians came in what's the Greek word for
Minie.
Armenian?
And I think that the word is Greek. I think. Yeah.
The metal people.
Metal. Mr. Mayor has suggested we proceed.
Yeah.
Because we are going to lose the sense of time.
Yeah, I know.
If this is the palace, then theoretically wouldn't there be hundreds of people that would be working in the palace?
Και όπως λέει ο Όμηρος, όταν μιλάει για το βασίλειο των Αμένων, ναι, αλλά και
I would like to put them, okay.
show
show you the three phases of the occupation of this part. You may see better there. This level, we have some ruins of the early and the mid-Helladic period. Point to this cyst grave, which is a characteristic type of grave of the mid-Helladic. It will not be completely excavated. It goes under the ruins of the sunrise nearby. The second phase, yes, which is very extensive, 37 meters. And there is a third phase, this one, which is easily discerning by the way of the construction of the walls. If there is to be any difference in the constructive way of buildings in antiquity, this is only the geometric period, which is called by the Germans Steinkleinigkeits. It is to mean that these buildings in the geometric period are built with small stones. And this is the way these buildings were built. So, what happened in this area? I think this is the focal area. We have this remain, the presence of the cyst grave there. It dates to the early Helladic and the mid-Helladic period. That is to say, around the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. Also, in this period, the city of Lacedaemon have been founded, and I can say that the only previous finds from this area are some Neolithic, late Neolithic figurines, which I think date the first installation on the place. Then comes an organized settlement, which is represented in our excavations by these small remains. The rest of it lies under the palace, as I explained before, and the monuments, the funeral monuments of this period are to be seen on the top of the Acropolis, where we have a very well organized cemetery, which dates from the early Helladic II to the mid-Helladic III period. It is one of the best organized cemeteries on the Greek mainland, and tombs are B5 tombs, follow tombs, similar to those found in Messara, in Crete, many years ago by Stephanos Kantonios, and later by other authors. Braniger, who is a specialist in this field, thinks that this type of tomb, like Tholos, tomb built by stone, which has a diameter of about 5 meters, may have been originated in Africa, but the monuments which have been found there, they don't present certain secure chronological horizon, so it remains, the question remains open when this shape has been originated. I think that in Greece we have already some circular funeral monuments in the Steno, in the island of Lefkas, which have been excavated by Derfeld. Derfeld has characterized these things as tumuli, and I think that everybody now accepts this view, and the oldest of them are to be dated at the late Helladic 3C period, all in the transition from early Helladic to mid-Helladic. My opinion is that
What years are they first found?
about from the third millennium, 2000 only in Messaras, are 700 years earlier than any Kurgan, multiple burials ever found in Greek soil. And this must reorientate our assessment about the origins of the Minian civilization, of the Minian culture, of the name of the Minian, and the name of the city. What does Laconia mean? Is this a Greek name? Is the Akinthos a Greek name? Because the suffix and th, Nifida, Olinthos, Orinthos, Valinthos, Terevinthos, Minthi, has been considered first by Paul Kretschmer and then by others as an indication that this people is pre-Hellenic. Some have thought that it is the same people with the Luvians who inhabited Asian islands, and of course, when we come to the deity, to the cult of the Akinthos, everybody thinks that the Akinthos should have been the pre-Hellenic cult taken over by the Indo-European speakers when they came to Greece at the turn of from the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BC. This is a perplexing problem because Dietrich, who wrote a very important study on Iakinthia, has asserted that Iakinthos is mainly a Dorian and not an Achaean cult. And the antithesis of Achaean, Dorian, Apollo, and Iakinthos must be reversed. So perhaps Apollo was the Achaean deity worshipped in Aegean Kyriaki at Mycenae in the late Helladic 3C period, and not the Iakinthos. So, who introduced the cult of the Akinthos to Laconia? According to these archaeologists, these scholars, it was introduced by the pre-Hellenes, the Greeks, and it was taken over by the Dorians when they came to Amity. When did the Dorians come to Amity? This is another stritike zaken. That's a matter of controversy. Did they come at the... So the first Indo-European speakers were the ancestors of the Dorians. So Cartlet said, well, minions of this mysterious people, we know from Herodotus that they lived in Taigetos. So Cartlet thinks minions were probably the pre-Hellenic population of Laconia who had taken to the hills, where Herodotus locates them. During the Mycenaean time of troubles, as he says, what are these time of troubles? And returned back when dust kept settling. This is very poetic, but it cannot explain the situation. The Mycenaean time of troubles would be one would think that it refers to the destruction of the Mycenaean palace, unless the time of troubles was for the Minians when they were reigned by their overlords, the Mycenaeans.
Question. Professor, is this the palace of Menelaus, and
So
why
this is the temple erected, built here, proto-geometric temple. So, what happened to these ruins? The northern wall of the megalon has been cut by a medieval building. From this point, I will show you this in my speech with maps and plans and so on. So, the northern wall was cut from a medieval building which has been removed, of course. And of the dividing walls, only one was preserved, this one, here. During the 11th century BC, there was built a temple in the middle of the Megaron with these small stones. And the pottery from the foundations of this building date to the proto-geometric period. There is a pottery, there is a kind of vases, there are kind of vases which are called by Desborough pre-geometric, proto-geometric style, which is encountered in Amikle and in Sparta. It was also found here. When does proto-geometric pottery, the Laconian proto-geometric style begin? There's another matter of controversy. Its origins are sought here and there. Perhaps we have time to discuss it later, but anyway, either if we accept my date of the temple in the 11th century, or if we take as the beginning of the Laconian proto-geometric style, the middle of the 10th century, this temple was built here at the beginning of the proto-geometric period in the 10th century BC. To whom was this temple devoted? We have Apostoleli of the Laconian type. I'm going to show you all these parts here. And we have also some discs, some lunguates. We have some letters inscribed upon them. And the letters are epsilon, delta, and alpha. E, D, and A. Was here a Dorian triad worship? And who was this triad? Dorian triads. They are called by Homer trichaites. When this temple was built here, at the beginning of the proto-geometric style, Laconia, the area was abandoned. The burial tombs in the cemetery of Pellana were abandoned, and all this happens around 1050 BC. So the area was abandoned. A small town was built, not on the ruins of the metropolis, in another hill, and I think this is the historical Pellana, and the rest of the population went to the middle valley of the Rotas and built the new Dorian metropolis of Sparta. So, this is the Megaron and this is the palatial complex. When we climb up, you see the magazines which have the same orientation as this building until the foots of this height there. You see in successive lines all these buildings which have been used as a shrine. Here we have a shrine with figurines. I'll show you this picture. And some other magazines which go up to the hill. And many offerings have been found in this area, dating from the 11th century BC to the 8th century AD. We stargazers, the ancient northern well, I think that until 1050, everything goes okay. Then we have this hiatus, the city was abandoned by order. They were ordered to leave the city. They cleaned the area, they built the temple, and they transferred Lacedaemon to a religious place. Then it took, I think, the name Therapy. Therapy. The Therapy in Greek means a religious place.
So this is Therapy.
It became Therapy. It started as Lacedaemon in the Minian period. The Mycenaeans kept the name. It is preserved in the Homeric epos. I think that we have two Lacedaemon, because Lacedaemon Kitoesa does not belong to the period of Menelaus. I explained that in my book. Then, but the name of the city remained until the 11th century BC. Then, it lost its name.
It lost Therapy.
It was named Therapy. Sparti was founded, and perhaps from then, Sparti took also its second name. It was named Sparti and Lacedaemon.
One last question. Where is the palace?
All this is palace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this
A
is
palace is a complex. It comprises the megara, the residence, and many other parts, the supplementary buildings, auxiliary buildings, sanctuaries, archives, magazines, laboratories. So the whole slope, the whole area, this area,
Where's the megara?
And in the middle of the megaron was later built the temple of the proto-geometric.
Now we got it.
This is not peculiar. This is something real here. It happened to all the palaces, Mycenaean palaces in Greece. Upon the megaron of Mycenae, a temple for Athena was built. In Pyrrhus for Hera. In Thebes for Dionysos. Here, I think that the deity was not one of the Olympian deities, but was Helen. Exactly. And their name is Greek and means metallurgy. I think that this name had been taken over by the European languages. But since the Minians are active here from the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC, so the Greek-speaking people were here from the end of the 4th millennium.
This is very startling news.
And why was Lacedaemon was named so? Because I forgot that. Because I think its name signifies its geological and hydrological picture. Lacedaemon was in the middle of a huge lake. And it was a holy place, a holy capital. That is the word demon for. And the word lak is the same word as lake. So the Greek equivalent is lakis. So we can reconstruct in our imagination a huge lake in the middle of which was the city of Lacedaemon.
We have a place, it's even a road, Laki. And then we have the question.
All right. Πάμε λίγο έτσι. Εγώ από τον Δήμαρχο είμαι...
Ο Δήμαρχος. Εκτός από αυτές τις οριοθετήσεις, του ανακτόρου, βρήκατε τίποτε κανένα σπουδαίο έβριμα?
Ναι, θα τα πούμε. Some crocodiles living in the magazines of the palace until 1050. We found here a proto-geometric pottery, 6 phases. One is quite characteristic. It is a crater on a high conical roof with principal groovings and dividers and so on. It keeps on the sub-Mycenaean tradition. I think it's the first case we have in Laconia, the continuation of this tradition. Both sides. The new Laconian proto-geometric style, which is with well-known features, darkness and so on. And then we have the survival of the sub-Mycenaean style, whose final comes in this pithos burial. In this pithos burial, we found proto-geometric pottery of the regular style, and this is the last clue of the habitation of Laconia. And it coincides with the erection of the temple in the middle of the Megalith. And coincides also with the end of the use of the royal troops at Pellana. So the date 1050 is crucial for the history of Laconia, of Sparta, of Laconia, and for the whole thing. I think this is the date of the founding of Sparta, the abandonment of Laconia.
Did you find anything in there?
Yeah, so proto-geometric
Where are they now?
So this is an actual burial site. And if you found the stone, bones. So this wall presumably covers that. Γιατί την Πελλάνα δεν την ξέραμε. Ήταν παρθένο. Τώρα γράφει. Και αλλάζει δεδόμενα παλιά. Mainly sauce balls and cups of the Pelagic period. They go down to the Mediterranean fringe here. So this is used here of 1,000 years for this perivoli, for this surface, which cover all this strip of land in this area, and they are in a very prominent and conspicuous place in the whole pattern.
Where are the remains?
The remains are in the museum. And here we have two pithy burials, which are middle Palladic, exactly as the similar burials in Crete date to the middle Minoan period. There we also have Larnakes, but we have also Pithoi burials, like in Laconia. So there is a link between Crete and Laconia, and the problem is who comes first, who comes second. This is an organized, maybe a royal cemetery, if we have to count that perhaps under the Mycenaean palace there could be found not a palace, but something, the residence of a ruling class, samples of which we have perhaps at Akovitika in Messenia or in Lerna in Argos. This could be the third case where we might uncover palace or a kind of palace and an organized cemetery of Polos tombs which cover a period of 1,000 years. Remarkably, these tombs are connected with each other in the shape of the number 8. So it reminds us of the dual kingship in Sparta, whose origin is quite obscure. It's only to surmise that since also the Mycenaean cemetery presents two big graves, that there were two ruling families in Laconia from the beginning, and this habit has been taken over by Sparta. So mother city of Sparta is always Laconia. Its institutions, I think, are oriented to Laconia. So this is a material culture. We have unearthed about 6 of those circles. These are burial solely, but there is another one, some meters to the south, with a bothros in the middle, which was not used for burials, but for rituals. The bothros was filled with Elpida sauce pots, carbonized wood and bones and ashes. So we had sacrifices executed there. So we might also have a cult for the dead, which was later inherited by the Mycenaeans.
So is there any transition between normal burial grounds and the burial grounds of this type of...
When Lacedaemon, a minion Lacedaemon is destroyed, yes, the site is occupied by the Mycenaeans. And I'm going to show you how did this happen here, on the top of the Acropolis. We'll go there.
Φτιάξτε όλα τα άλλα και να πούμε στη Γεωργία να έρθει λίγο νωρίτερα, θα της πούμε να έρθει λίγο νωρίτερα. Ναι, εντάξει, το λέω τώρα στον κύριο Δήμαρχο.
Grave. The grave of the early Mycenaean period. And this,
εντάξει, το λέω τώρα στον κύριο Δήμαρχο.
grave. The grave of the early Mycenaean period. And this grave marks a change in the government of the site. The Minian state ceases to exist, and Mycenaeans take control of the area and make in the same place their capital. They keep the name of Laconia, but the government is quite different. The administration is Mycenaean now. So what's the difference between Minians and Mycenaeans? Both are Greek races, both are Greeks. And when they return back as sea people, they try to restore its empire, first in Laconia. It is interesting that in one of the Tholos tombs, Elpida, we found a fragment of pottery of the Roman imperial period, which bears the inscription Heracles, to Heracles. So the memory of Heracles was vivid in Pellana until the 2nd century AD. Why here not in Sparta? Because Heracles are traditionally thought to be the first kings of Sparta. But they are worshipped in Laconia. So it's strange, eh? But perhaps it interprets what happened. The Heracles left Laconia at the end of the 18th century BC, when the metropolis was destroyed by the flood. And when the Mycenaeans came here at the beginning of the 17th century, and here we have the proof for that, I mean the big shaft grave and the other cyst graves which satellite the royal tomb. It's the same shim as we found that in Mycenae. So we have early Mycenaeans here. The shaft grave and the cyst graves. We have pottery and weapons and other jewels from this period, these small graves, which were for attendance of the royal deads. So another period begins here, and this is the Mycenaean period, which culminates in the erection of the palace in the southern slope of the Acropolis. And you may have a very good view of the palace from this point. how it was organized. The megaron in front facing the Aegetos and the plain, and behind the whole installation, the auxiliary buildings, the archives, the magazines, the storerooms, all.
Did you find any remains in those shacks?
Yeah.
What did you find and where are they?
Another one we found small two sides, so it was a laboratory. Another we found pieces, storages. Basin for storage wheat or wine, so they were magnets, storerooms.
Were they pristine when you opened them up, or were they looted?
Well, they were looted. They were looted because this area was inhabited until the middle of the 11th century, and then it was occupied and reoccupied by various invaders, starting with the Slavs of the 7th century AD, and then the Franks of the 13th century AD, and they built the whole city here, Franks. And one part of this fortress here, which they Leocastro. And the same megaron and the temple, the proto-geometric temple, was inhabited during the medieval period. So all the movable finds of the palace got lost.
The Union or Union and Heraclides, same people?
Yes, they are the same people, I think. Part of the Minians are the Heraclids. The leaders of the Minians are the Heraclids. And the leaders of the Dorians, later, they are the Heraclids. Not all, as Kepler says, not all Dorians are Heraclids, but all Heraclids are Dorians.
So this is why they wanted to return back here.
Yeah, that's right.
So
And we have the tradition that they return. Nobody speaks of an invasion of the Heraclids. Nobody speaks of an invasion of the Dorians. I think this terms in foreign languages used by colleagues. The Germans say the Einwanderung der Dorien, the invasion of Dorien. This is not an invasion. The tradition speaks of the Cathodos of the Dorians. What means Cathodos? Cathodos means when somebody descends from a higher point to another one. I think that the Dorians were in Laconia and descended to Sparta. Not invasion. And the tradition spoke of the return of the Heraclids, not invasion of the Heraclids. Where did they return? They returned in the place
they started from.
Right?
Very good point.
Και ουδέν με λείπουνε. Αλλά και υπάρχει νόστας. Ναι, είναι.
Ναι, οπότε πρέπει να είναι πολύ δύσκολο.
Δύσκολο γάμ Βασίλ.
Δεν αποκλείεται. But the first excavator of the site here was the late Emperor Karachalios in 1926. He cleared these tombs, two tombs here, medium size, and found interesting things.
dating to the late Palladic 3A period, and among them there was a seal stone with an undecipherable depiction, which attracted the attention of Strong, who has published the catalogue of the seals in the British Museum. Curiously, the scholars and archaeologists did not pay much attention to this discovery, and they left Pellana unexplored for 50 years. When we came here, we suspected that another tomb should be hidden somewhere in the area. And we started our work in Pellana after finding this tomb, which I'm going to show you in some minutes. But this has preserved its ceiling, and it's interesting to see how a Tholos tomb filled in the rock was constructed. This hole in the middle, it is not in the geometric middle of the circle, it's closer to the entrance for technical reasons. And some think that this hole there imitates the hole in the big high tombs, which is a constructive characteristic of these tombs. So this is a peculiar shape of the Royal gates of Laconia. And there is another capital city of the Mycenaean period, which also has tombs filled in rock, and this is the Boeotian Thebes, where the largest Mycenaean tomb in Greece has been located some years ago. The distance from the palace is reasonable, I think, the same as the royal tombs of Mycenaean. The duration of tombs covers the period from the middle of the 15th, 16th century to the middle of the 11th century. This last date is, I think, very important. The use of the royal tombs in this place, and around 1050 BC, and this coincides with the date of the abandonment of Laconia, the founding of Sparti and Pellana, and the erection of the temple in the middle of the palace. In the next tomb, the big tomb, was this fragment of pottery found with the inscription Heraclides, which I'm going to show you, with among many other offerings dating from the archaic to the Roman imperial period. Lamps and figurines and vases, which were used by the people of Pellana to carry cakes and other liquid offerings to the ancestors, to the heroes.
Είναι άδειο μέσα, είναι άδειο.
Χωράμε όλοι. Περάμε στο μεγάλο τάφο. Πάμε.
Κύριε
απλώς να έχετε μια ιδέα πώς είναι ένας γιατί ο άλλος...
Αυτές οι
γράφουν όλοι.
Αυτή δεν είναι...
Πότε δεν είναι αρχαία.
Κύριε Σπυρόπουλο, μπορούμε να έχουμε 5 λόγια στην ελληνική πάνω στο...
Αυτός ο τάφος δεν έχει καταρρεύσει στην όροφή του και είναι ένα δείγμα πώς γινόταν ένας λαξεπτός τάφος σκαλισμένος στο βράχο. Είπα ότι η τρύπα αυτή στο κέντρο δεν είναι ακριβώς το κέντρο του κύκλου της Θόλου, γιατί για κατασκευαστικούς λόγους γίνεται πιο κοντά προς την είσοδο, για να μην πέσει ο τάφος. Δεν μπόρεσαν να επιτύχουν το απόλυτα κυκλικό σχήμα, δηλαδή τον τάφο παραγωγής, με το κόψει τη μέση, το βάζει στη μέση. Επειδή εδώ σμίγουν δύο σχήματα, το στρογγυλό και το ευθύγραμμο, αναγκάζονται να κουβαλήσουν πιο κοντά το κέντρο της Θόλου για να μην τους πέσει ο τάφος. Λοιπόν, αυτό το σχήμα το μιμούνται αλλού η θολωτή χτιστή τάφη.
Επειδή η εικόνα χάνει την σταθερότητα, δηλαδή...
Ναι, βέβαια, ναι, θα πέσει. Άμα το σκάψετε κι άλλο...
Είναι το σπάσιμο.
Θα σου πέσει. Λοιπόν, έλεγα λοιπόν ότι ναι, αυτόν τον τάφο τον έσκαψε ο Καραχάλιος το 1926. Όπως γράφει ο ίδιος ο άνθρωπος, ήταν εδώ δίπλα στο ρέμα και είχε εμείς μπάζα μέσα. Και τον φώναξαν και ήρθε εδώ από την αρχαιολογική εταιρεία και τον καθάρισε. Και είχε βρει ενδιαφέροντα πράγματα του 1300 π.Χ. Μετά ήρθαν στην Πελλάνα οι Άγγλοι, η Αγγλική Αρχαιολογική Σχολή που έκαναν σκαφέ στην Κοκκινόραχη απέναντι από τη Σπάρτη, ψάχνοντας εκεί για το ανάκτορο. Έκανε ένα survey σε όλη τη Λακωνία και έχει γράψει το BSA, το British School Annual του 1960-61, έχουν γράψει και τα πορίσματα της επιφανειακής. Τις επιφανειακές τους έρευνας στην Πελλάνα, όπου είπαν ότι εκεί βρει ο Καραχάλιος 2 τάφους. Δεν υποψιάστηκε ότι μπορεί να υπάρχει κάτι περισσότερο. Ναι, εμείς λοιπόν ήρθαμε εδώ το 1980 με τον κύριο Σταματάκο, τον Βασίλη, και λέμε δεν κάνουμε και μια τομή πιο δίπλα γιατί μας αρέσει ο τόπος. Κάτι κρύβει εδώ, μόνο αυτή ήσανε η τάφη, τίποτα άλλο. Και σκάβοντας λοιπόν βρήκαμε εκεί ένα τεράστιο τάφο, ο μεγαλύτερο τάφος στην Ελλάδα. Αυτού του τύπου είναι ο μεγαλύτερος όλη την Ελλάδα. Και από εκεί άρχισε η ιστορία όλη της Πελλάνας, μήπως είναι η Λακεδαίμον, μήπως είναι η έδρα του Ανακτόρου, μήπως πρέπει να βρούμε εδώ το Ανάκτορο και η έδρα του Βασιλείου. Και πάλι λέγοντας.
Είναι όμως το μήπως είναι.
Interesting is that this tomb and the other tombs of this cemetery were used in the so-called post-palatial period, because all palaces in Greece had been destroyed by fire at the end of the 13th century BC, so to say 12th century BC. But here we have use of them in the so-called legendary 3C period and the Sub-Mycenaean period. Who reigned who ruled at Laconia this time? Probably the Heracles. Because, as I explained to you before, there is a fragment of a vase devoted here to Heracles inscribed in relief inscription. That means that the workshop, somewhere here in Pellana, during the Roman Imperial period, made these offerings in a mound and offered them or sold them to the adorants who were bringing these plates in the graves for the heroized ancestors. So the tradition lived here forever, at least until the end of the antiquity in the 7th century AD. The only one who didn't say anything was Pellana. He came to Pellana and was eyewitness of what happened here, but he didn't mention anything. Despite his custom to refer to these acts, for example, when he speaks of the offerings made in the tomb of the queens, the sons of Oedipus. He doesn't say even a word about what happened in Pellana.
What did you find here when you got?
On the floor, we found cases of the Roman period, lamps, figures, offerings to the ancestors, and some undisturbed burials of the Masonic period. In a corner there we found two big amphoras of the so-called palace style. I'm going to show you these 5 vases, these 5 pottery. This dates to the 15th century BC, and then pottery of succeeding periods, of the succeeding phases, down to the Masonic period. Not only from this, but from the whole cemetery. What is sure is that cemetery and the palace go together. It cannot be disconnected. The tombs were made in the 15th century, but they lasted until the end of the palace period in Laconia. The 12th century is the day all palaces will be destroyed by fire. But here in Laconia we have a reoccupation period which lasted another 150 years. I think this was the rule of the Heracles. At 1050, to judge by the finds in the palace and here, I think that they left Laconia and they went to the mid-valley of the Rhodas, founding the new Doric capital of Sparta. I think this is my contribution to the knowledge about the founding of Sparta. I think that this can help to understand how the whole thing was developed. Ο πιο μεγάλος χάρτος. Είχαμε βρει μάλλον ένα πλευρά κατά κόντρια, το οποίο το έχω σαν ο τάφος τούτος είναι ο πιο μεγάλος. Η βασιλική οικογένεια της Λακεδαίμονος. Την Ελένη και το Μενέλο, νομίζω ναι.
Όσο παλάτι από εκεί, ήταν εδώ,
Πάμε.
Υπάρχει καμία γραφή που δεν άσχει αυτούς τους τάφους.